"You clumsy, useless piece of trash." The voice echoed through the freezing concrete warehouse. It sliced right through the heavy hum of the conveyor belts. A silver tray clattered violently against the hard floor. Premium chocolate-coated macadamia nuts scattered everywhere. They rolled into the dirty, freezing puddles on the ground. The warehouse manager towered over Clara. He was a man who wore his tiny bit of authority like a heavy crown. He reached out and violently ripped the plastic name tag right off her apron. He tossed it into a puddle of rainwater that had leaked through the rusted roof. "Get out of my sight, and don't even think about seeing a single dime of your paycheck this month." Clara didn't argue. She simply couldn't. She just dropped to her knees on the freezing floor. Her hands were shaking violently as she desperately tried to gather the ruined merchandise. She tried to wipe the mud off the little seeds. She clutched them to her chest, as if her own body heat could somehow save them. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks, mixing with the grime on her face. From the deep shadows of the loading dock, a man in a faded canvas jacket watched in silence. He tightly held the hand of a little girl, but his eyes were locked on the manager, and they were burning with a quiet, terrifying rage. "Hello, everyone. They say that the seeds of human kindness, planted with sweat and dignity, will always sprout. They will grow, even in the harshest winter storms. If you truly believe in the warmth of humanity, please leave a prayer in the comments below. Type, 'I vow to plant seeds of kindness and courage to reap God's blessings of abundant happiness,' and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this." Life hadn't exactly been fair to Clara. That visible tremor in her hands wasn't from a disease or a bad habit. It was a permanent nerve injury she sustained 2 years ago. She had thrown herself into the path of a collapsing steel awning during a brutal winter storm. She did it to push a complete stranger out of the way. She saved a life that day, but she lost her physical coordination. And in this fast-paced world, if you can't work fast, you get left behind. She had to take this brutal warehouse job because nobody else would hire a worker with shaking hands. She desperately needed the money. Back in her tiny, drafty apartment, her elderly grandmother was completely bedridden. Every single cent Clara made sorting nuts in the freezing cold went straight to her grandmother's medication. The manager knew all about this. He knew exactly how desperate she was, and he deliberately weaponized it. He specifically assigned her to the premium sorting line. It was the one station that required absolute precision to handle the delicate, expensive, organic goods. He wanted her to fail. He would stand right behind her, breathing down her neck. He would just wait for her trembling fingers to fumble a package. He used her as a punching bag to terrify the other workers. He wanted everyone to know exactly what happens when you cross him. Every single day was a battle for sheer survival. Clara just swallowed her pride, ignored the cruel insults, and kept her head down. But today was different. The warehouse was incredibly chaotic. Forklifts were beeping loudly, warning sirens were wailing, and the manager was screaming at the top of his lungs. The industrial noise was absolutely deafening. Suddenly, a piercing scream cut right through the racket. It was the little girl, standing by the loading dock. Her name was Lily. She was completely overwhelmed. Lily had severe autism, and the sensory overload of the warehouse was hitting her like a physical blow. She dropped to the floor, tightly covering her ears. She started rocking back and forth in absolute terror. Her father, the man in the faded jacket, dropped to his knees. He tried to shield her, but he was struggling to calm her down. The manager rolled his eyes in sheer disgust. He actually yelled at the man to take his noisy brat outside before he called security. Clara didn't hesitate for a second. She completely ignored the manager's glaring eyes. She abandoned her station and slowly walked over to the terrified little girl. She didn't look at her with pity. She understood exactly what it felt like to be completely helpless in a loud, angry world. Clara knelt down on the dirty, freezing concrete. She reached deep into the pocket of her worn apron. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were incredibly gentle. She pulled out a small handful of naturally dried chestnuts. They had been sitting in her pocket all morning, absorbing the warmth of her own body. She didn't speak loudly. She just held them out. In her trembling palms, she began to crack the shells. With her thumbs, she started whispering a quiet, rhythmic story about a brave little squirrel who hid his treasures in the snow. The steady, warm cadence of her voice somehow cut right through the chaos. Lily slowly stopped screaming. She peeked through her trembling fingers. She looked at the warm chestnuts, and then she looked at Clara's shaking hands. For the first time in over 2 years, a tiny, fragile smile appeared on Lily's face. She reached out and gently took a chestnut. The father, Henry, stared at Clara in absolute shock. He had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the best behavioral therapists in the world. None of them had gotten a genuine smile out of Lily. But this poor, exhausted warehouse worker just did it, with a handful of nuts and a pure heart. Sometimes, it takes a broken person to know exactly how to heal another broken soul. If you agree with this beautiful moment, please take a second to comment. Right. I vow to plant seeds of kindness and courage to reap God's blessings of abundant happiness. The tender moment was violently shattered by a heavy, steel-toed boot kicking a wooden crate. The warehouse manager came stomping around the corner like a raging bull. His face was completely red with fury, and the veins in his neck were bulging. He saw Clara kneeling on the dirty floor instead of standing at the premium sorting line. "Are you completely deaf, as well as crippled?" He screamed so loudly that the vile sound echoed off the high metal ceiling. He marched right up to Clara and viciously kicked the small pile of chestnuts out of her trembling hands. The warm, comforting seeds scattered across the wet, freezing concrete. Lily let out a terrified gasp, her hands instantly flying up to cover her ears again. She scrambled backward, trying to hide behind Clara's frail body. Clara didn't even think about her own safety. She instinctively wrapped her arms around the little girl to shield her from the angry man. "I told you to get out of my warehouse." The manager spat the cruel words directly at Clara's face. "You are officially fired, you useless piece of garbage, and for wasting my valuable time with these dirty, homeless beggars, I'm taking a penalty fee. I am keeping your entire final paycheck to cover the damages you caused to my premium merchandise today." Clara's heart completely shattered into a million irreversible pieces. That paycheck wasn't just money to her. It was her grandmother's oxygen, her medication, and their only lifeline to survive the brutal winter. She looked up at the manager, her eyes wide with absolute, crushing panic. She tried to speak, trying to beg him to just dock her pay, instead of firing her entirely. But before she could even utter a single word of mercy, the manager raised his heavy hand. He was fully intending to shove this frail, shaking woman hard onto the concrete. He wanted to make an example out of her, in front of the entire warehouse crew, but his hand never reached her shoulder. Henry moved with a terrifying, calculated speed that didn't match his humble appearance. His large hand shot out and clamped around the manager's wrist, like a vice made of solid titanium. The grip was so sudden and bone-crushing that the manager let out a high-pitched yelp of pure agony. "Don't you ever dare touch her." Henry's voice wasn't a loud, hysterical scream. It was a low, dangerous, vibrating growl that made the entire massive warehouse feel 10 degrees colder. He didn't let go of the manager's wrist, slowly applying more and more agonizing pressure. The manager tried to yank his arm back, but he was completely immobilized. Henry calmly reached into the inside pocket of his faded, dusty canvas jacket with his free hand. He pulled out a sleek, highly encrypted corporate satellite phone. He pressed a single, pre-programmed button and lifted it to his ear. "Bring them in right now." The manager tried to laugh it off, but his voice was trembling uncontrollably with sudden fear. "Who the hell do you think you are? Calling for backup in my secure facility. I'll have the cops arrest you for trespassing." Less than 3 minutes later, the massive steel loading dock doors violently began to roll open. A convoy of 4 identical matte black, heavily armored SUVs drove straight into the center of the warehouse. The heavy military-grade tires screeched aggressively against the wet concrete floor. The flashing hazard lights illuminated the dark corners of the building. Dozens of forklift drivers and sorting workers stopped exactly what they were doing and stared in absolute shock. The doors of the lead luxury vehicle swung open in perfect unison. A specialized team of men and women, wearing immaculate, high-end tailored suits, stepped out into the cold air. They didn't look like local regional management or low-level supervisors. They looked like elite Wall Street executives and high-powered corporate lawyers. The lead secretary, a stern-looking woman holding a glowing digital tablet, walked briskly past the trembling manager. She didn't even acknowledge his existence. She stopped right in front of Henry, who was still wearing his faded jacket and holding the manager's wrist. She bowed deeply, a full, highly respectful 90 degrees. "Mr. Chairman, the emergency acquisition paperwork for this entire regional logistics hub has been completely finalized and signed by the board. You now officially own this facility, the land it sits on, and every single contract associated with it." The warehouse manager's face drained of all its natural color, turning a sickly, pale shade of white. His knees physically buckled under his heavy weight. He suddenly realized, in one horrifying, reality-shattering second, the massive mistake he had made. He hadn't just insulted a homeless man looking for a warm place to stay. He had just brutally assaulted Henry Sterling. Henry was the supreme billionaire founder and CEO of the largest organic agricultural and logistics empire in the entire nation. You're the supreme owner?" The manager stammered wildly, his arrogant, booming voice reduced to a pathetic, terrified whisper. Henry finally released the man's wrist, shoving his arm away with absolute, unadulterated disgust. "I built this international company to deliver pure, healing, healthy food to families who need it. I didn't build it to employ abusive, power-hungry tyrants who exploit hard-working people for their own sick amusement. You are fired, effective immediately. But you aren't just walking away with a simple termination paper." Henry turned to his elite team of corporate lawyers. "Audit every single payroll record, every timesheet, and every inventory log this man has touched for the last 5 years. I want him prosecuted to the absolute fullest extent of the federal law for wage theft, physical intimidation, and worker exploitation. Make sure he never works in this industry again." The manager dropped to his knees, right in the freezing, dirty puddle he had thrown Clara's name tag into. He started sobbing hysterically, aggressively begging for a second chance, and claiming it was all a big misunderstanding. But nobody even looked at him with an ounce of pity. As the corporate security team forcefully dragged him out of the building, Henry slowly turned his attention back to Clara. She was still kneeling on the floor, completely paralyzed by the shocking turn of events. He gently offered her his warm hand and carefully helped her stand up. He looked at her trembling fingers, not with the disgust she was used to, but with profound, overwhelming respect. It takes a truly pure, unbreakable heart to create real healing in this broken world. Your kindness saved my daughter from a terrifying panic attack today. You didn't care that you had nothing to give. You just gave everything you had anyway. Clara, I absolutely refuse to let you sort nuts on a freezing floor ever again. I am officially appointing you as the Executive Director of Organic Quality Control for my entire national supply chain, because I only want someone with your level of empathy and integrity deciding what goes into the homes of our millions of customers." Clara burst into uncontrollable tears of pure joy, covering her face with her shaking hands. She realized in that exact moment that her beloved grandmother was finally going to be safe, warm, and fully cared for. Justice is the most beautiful thing in the world, when it powerfully protects the innocent and punishes the cruel. If you are cheering for Clara's incredible, well-deserved victory today, please take a moment to leave a comment right now. Write, "I vow to plant seeds of kindness and courage to reap God's blessings of abundant happiness." Time has a truly wonderful, miraculous way of healing even the deepest, most painful wounds. 2 years later, that same freezing, miserable warehouse had been completely transformed. It wasn't a cold, depressing storage facility anymore. It was glowing brilliantly, with the warm, golden light of thousands of beautiful royal paper lanterns. The entire staff, now treated with respect and earning fair wages, was gathered around, cheering and clapping their hands loudly. Clara stood glowing in the very center of the room. She was wearing a beautiful, elegant white dress that gracefully covered her old accident scars. Her hands still had a very slight tremor, but they were currently being held tightly by a very happy little girl. Lily wasn't screaming, crying, or hiding from the world anymore. She was smiling brightly, laughing out loud, and wearing a stunning tiny flower girl dress. Henry stepped forward through the cheering crowd and slowly got down on one knee in front of Clara. He looked deeply into the eyes of the incredible woman who had single-handedly brought the light back into his dark, lonely world. He pulled out a breathtaking, custom-designed diamond ring that sparkled intensely under the warm lanterns. He didn't just offer her a fancy corporate title or a massive, unimaginable fortune. He offered her a permanent, impenetrable fortress of unconditional love and a real family. When we actively choose to share a single drop of warmth and kindness in the bitter, freezing winter of life, the universe always notices. God will always repay that beautiful sacrifice with a love and happiness far greater than we could ever possibly imagine. Thank you so much for watching this incredible, heartwarming journey with us today. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button right now to warm your heart with our amazing stories every single day. And before you close this video, please don't forget to type our final beautiful prayer in the comments section below. Write, "I vow to plant seeds of kindness and courage to reap God's blessings of abundant happiness." See you all in the next inspiring story.